Think about the last time you were at Mass and the bell rang. The priest took the bread in his hands and said the words, and he lifted it up above his head, and somewhere off to the side a boy rang a bell 3 times. And what did you do? I will tell you what most of us do, and I include myself in this, because I did it for years before anybody told me otherwise. We bow our heads, we look at the floor, we wait, respectfully, for the bell to finish, and then we get on with the rest of the Mass. And it is a good instinct, and it comes from reverence, and it is almost exactly backwards. Breathe. God is here. I am Pastor Robin Schwartz, and tonight I want to give you one thing to do at that moment. 1. It takes 4 words and about 2 seconds, and if you do it this Sunday, I think you will notice something you have not noticed in a very long time. Here it is, and I am not going to make you wait for it. When the priest lifts the host, look at it, and say, silently, in your own heart, "My Lord and my God." That is the whole thing. Look, and say those 4 words. Now, I could stop there, and some of you should. If you have 4 minutes and a life that is full, take that and go and use it on Sunday, and you will have got everything this video has to give you. But I would like to tell you where those 4 words come from, and why looking is the point rather than the problem, and what that gesture actually was invented for 800 years ago. Because when you know that, it stops being a nice practice, and becomes something you will not want to miss again. I also want to show you that God has asked people to do this before, long before there was a Mass. That part surprised me more than anything else I found, and I am going to be honest with you about the things people claim for this that are not true, because a great many of them are floating around, and some of them will do you harm. Stay with me for that part especially. Let me start with the 4 words, because they are not mine, and they are not the church's invention. They belong to a man who had already made a fool of himself. Thomas was not in the room. The others had seen the Lord, and Thomas had not, and he would not take it from them. "Unless I see the mark of the nails in his hands, and put my finger into the mark, and put my hand into his side, I will not believe." That is what he said, in front of everybody. And 8 days later, the Lord came back, and he came back for him. He came through a locked door, and he walked up to the one man in the room who had refused him, and he held out his hands and said, "Put your finger here." And Thomas did not put his finger anywhere. He fell down and said 5 words in Greek that come into English as 4. "My Lord and my God." Now I want you to notice who is saying that. Not the loyal one, not the one who never doubted. The one who had held out, who had wanted proof, who had said the embarrassing thing in front of his friends. That is the man the church puts in your mouth at the holiest moment of the Mass. And I do not think that is an accident. I think it is a kindness. Because if you have ever knelt in that pew and not been sure, not sure what you believe, not sure it is really him, not sure why you keep coming, then those words were said first by somebody standing exactly where you are standing, and he said them anyway, and he was not sent away. Breathe. God is here. Now, before I take you to Paris in the year 1200, I want to put something underneath all of this, because I do not want you leaving here thinking this is a medieval decoration that somebody bolted onto the Mass. I will tell you what struck me, and it took me an embarrassingly long time to see it. God has done this before. Long before there was a church, long before there was a Mass, the thing he asked of his people in the worst hour they ever had was that they would look at something. They were in the desert, and they were dying. Snakes in the camp. People going down all around them, and the sand hot enough through a sandal to make a man hurry, and no way out of any of it. And they came to Moses and admitted they had been wrong, and the Lord did not take the snakes away. Read it, that is not what happens. He tells Moses to make a serpent of bronze and set it on a pole and lift it up, and he says that anyone who has been bitten, when he looks at it, shall live. That is the entire cure. Look and live. No pilgrimage, no payment, no qualifications, and no strength required, which is just as well, because a man lying in the dirt with poison in his blood does not have any. He only has to turn his head. Now I would not dare to hang the Mass on that story on my own authority, except that the Lord did it himself. He said it to Nicodemus, at night, quietly, to a frightened man who had come when nobody could see him. As Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, so must the Son of Man be lifted up, that whoever believes in him may have eternal life. And later, in front of a crowd, out loud, and I, when I am lifted up from the earth, will draw all people to myself. Lifted up, look at him, live. So when a priest raises that host above his head this Sunday, he is standing inside a pattern that is older than the church herself, older than the Gospels, older than the word Christian. And the response God asked for then is the response he is asking for now, and it has never once been complicated. Lift your head, breathe. God is here. Now let me tell you what that lifting up actually is, because the history of it explains everything and almost nobody knows it. For the first 1,000 years of the church, there was no elevation. The priest said the words and the bread became what it becomes, and nobody lifted anything above their head. It was not a thing. And then, around the year 1200, in Paris, it began, and it spread across Europe faster than almost any custom in the church's history, within a couple of generations, which for the church is a stampede. And the reason is heartbreaking. People had almost entirely stopped receiving communion, not because they had stopped believing, because they believed so intensely and thought so poorly of themselves, that ordinary people had come to feel they were not fit to receive more than once or twice in a lifetime. Some received at Easter, some received on their deathbed. That was it. So you had churches full of people who believed with their whole hearts that the living God came down onto that altar, and who had decided they would never dare come near him. And so the priest lifted it up, so that they could see. They called it seeing the Lord, and people would go from church to catch the moment. In the cities they would run, there are accounts of people going from one altar to the next to see it again. If you could not receive him, you could at least look at him. It was the closest they were permitted to come, and they came in their thousands. So when the priest lifts that host above his head this Sunday, he is not performing a flourish. He is doing something that was invented for the sake of the people at the back. It exists for the ones who felt unworthy. That gesture was made for the person who is not going up. Breathe. God is here. And I want to tell you about a woman who came out of that same century, because the one feast in the whole year that exists purely to look at him did not come from a council or a committee of learned men. It came from an orphan nobody listened to. Her name was Juliana. She was born around 1192, just outside Liège, in what is now Belgium, and both her parents were dead before she was 5 years old. She and her sister were handed over to a religious house on the edge of the city, a place called Montcornillon that was attached to a hospital for lepers, and she grew up among the sick and the women who nursed them. That was her childhood, bandages and prayers. And from the time she was a young woman, the same thing came to her whenever she prayed. A full moon, bright and whole and beautiful with one dark stripe running across the face of it. She did not know what it meant, and she did not tell anybody. For 20 years, she did not tell anybody. Sit with that for a moment, because we live in an age in which a person cannot hold a thought for 20 minutes without telling the world about it. Eventually, she came to believe she understood it. The moon was the life of the church, and it was beautiful, and there was one thing missing out of it. There was no feast for the Eucharist itself. Holy Thursday was swallowed whole by the grief of that week, as it should be, but there was nowhere in the entire year where the church simply stood still, in the sunshine, and rejoiced over what she had been given. And when she finally said so, it went about as well as you would expect for a woman with no position and no protector in the year 1230. She was accused of things. She was driven out of her own monastery, and not once. She spent her last years moving between houses that would take her in, and she died at Fosses in 1258, more or less unknown. Now, she did live to see it granted. Her own diocese kept the feast in 1246, and then the bishop who granted it died almost immediately afterwards, and she watched the thing she had waited half her life for very nearly die with him. 6 years after Juliana was in the ground, a pope who had been an archdeacon in Liège, and who knew her case, extended that feast to the whole church. She never saw that. Not the processions across Europe, not the hymns written for it, not one square in one city filled with people walking behind him under a canopy. I keep her in mind when somebody sits across from me and tells me that they have prayed for years and produced nothing they can point to. Juliana of Liège handed the Universal Church a feast day and died in a borrowed room, in a town she had not chosen, with no idea that she had done it. Breathe. God is here, and that is why looking is not irreverence. Looking is the entire purpose of it. The bell exists to tell you to look. In an age when the Mass was in Latin and the priest was far away, and much of it was said quietly, the bell was the parish's way of saying, "Now, lift your head, here he is," which means that the bowed head and the closed eyes, however well meant and I did it for years, are a polite way of missing the one thing the moment was built to give you. Now, the 4 words and the church. This devotion, looking up at the elevated host and saying, "My Lord and my God," is not folk piety. It is something the church herself picked up and encouraged. In 1907, Pope Pius X attached an indulgence to it, to look upon the sacred host at the elevation and say those words devoutly. And here I have to stop and be honest with you about indulgences, because if I use that word and walk on, half of you will hear something the church has never taught, and the other half will close the video. An indulgence is not a bargain. It is not buying anything. It is not God being paid. What it means is this: sin does two things. It breaks the relationship, and that is dealt with in confession, entirely and completely. But it also leaves damage in you, in the people you hurt, in the habits it wore into you. An indulgence is the church applying the merits of Christ and the saints to that leftover damage. It is a mother cleaning up after a child who has already been forgiven. And for a very long time, indulgences were listed with numbers attached: 40 days, 7 years, 300 days, and ordinary people, quite reasonably, took those to be a calendar, time off, as though purgatory had a clock and you were shortening a sentence. That was never what those numbers meant. They referred to the old public penances of the early church, how many days of that ancient penance this act corresponded to. But almost nobody knew that, and the misunderstanding was so widespread and so persistent that in 1967, the church removed the numbers altogether. They are gone. There is no arithmetic. If somebody tells you that saying these words gets you a certain number of years off, they are working from a book that was corrected before some of you were born. So why am I telling you about the indulgence at all? Because of what it signals. When the church attaches something to a small devotional act, she is not running a shop. She is putting a hand on your shoulder and pointing and saying, "This one. Do this one. This little thing is worth more than you think." That is the whole of it. A pope looked at a 2-second habit that ordinary people had been keeping for centuries and said, "Yes, that. Keep doing that. Breathe. God is here. Now let me deal with the things that are not true, because they are out there, and you have probably met one of them." In the Middle Ages, alongside all that genuine devotion, a set of folk beliefs grew up about seeing the host at the elevation, that you would not die suddenly that day, that you would not go blind, that you would not go hungry, that your food would not spoil. People believed these things sincerely, and preachers spent a great deal of energy trying to get them back to what the moment actually is. They are folklore. They are not the teaching of the church. They never were, and I would be doing you no favor to leave them standing.
Forgive me for stepping in for one moment. I don't want to interrupt. I just want to be useful. I wrote a manual for the Catholics watching this, for the families who don't know what to do when the hour of death comes. The link is in the description below. You can read the first 2 pages before you decide. Now, back to the video.
And I want to say why it matters. Because somebody is thinking, well, where is the harm in a bit of old superstition? Here is the harm. If you believe that looking at the host protects you from sudden death, then what happens on the day somebody you love dies suddenly? What do you do with that? Either God broke a promise he never made, or you did it wrong. And I have sat with people carrying exactly that kind of wound grief, with a layer of self-accusation underneath it that should never have been there at all, put there by a promise the church never gave. So no, the elevation is not a charm. It does not protect your house. It does not settle your test results, and it will not keep anybody alive. What it is a moment in which the God who made you is present in front of you, and you are permitted to look at him and say something that is smaller than magic and infinitely bigger. Breathe. God is here. Now, what is actually happening at that moment, said as plainly as I can say it. The Lord took bread on the night before he died, and he gave thanks, and he broke it, and he said, "This is my body, which is given for you. Do this in remembrance of me." And St. Paul, writing to Corinth 20 years or so later, which is to say, while people who had been in that room were still alive, says that, "As often as you eat this bread and drink this cup, you proclaim the Lord's death until he comes." Until he comes. That is the church's whole understanding of what an altar is. Not a reenactment, not a play about something that happened. The one sacrifice, made present, in a parish hall, in the rain, on a Tuesday, in front of 11 people, and a heater that does not work. And if that sounds too small and too shabby to be the center of the universe, then listen to what the prophet Malachi said 400 years before the Lord was born. From the rising of the sun to its setting, my name is great among the nations, and in every place incense is offered to my name, and a pure offering, in every place. Not in the great cathedral, in every place, which includes a damp hall on a Tuesday, and 11 people, and a heater that has needed replacing since March. Breathe. God is here, and the elevation is the hinge of it. What the priest is holding above his head is not a symbol of the Lord. It is the Lord. If that is true and the church has held it, without wobbling, for 2,000 years, then 2 seconds of your attention is not a demanding request. It is the least anybody could ask. Now wait. Let me back up, because I have nearly walked past something and you need it. There is a second time he is shown to you in that same Mass, and hardly anybody connects the two. Later on, after the Our Father, after the sign of peace, the priest holds him up again, and this time he says words out loud that were first said by a wild-looking man standing in the Jordan Valley, pointing at somebody walking past. Behold the Lamb of God, who takes away the sin of the world. Behold. That is a looking word. It is not a thinking word. The first elevation shows you what has happened. The second shows you what you are about to be given. And the church puts an answer in your mouth for that one as well, and it is a strange one if you actually stop and hear it. Lord, I am not worthy that you should enter under my roof, but only say the word and my soul shall be healed. Now, that is a quotation too, and it does not belong to a saint or a bishop or a martyr. It belongs to a Roman officer, a soldier of the occupying army, a man with no standing whatsoever in the religion of Israel, who stopped the Lord in the street about a dying servant, and then would not let him come to the house. Do not trouble yourself. Say the word from where you are standing. And I want you to notice what the Lord said about that man. He said he had not found faith like it in all Israel. So when you hear yourself say, I am not worthy, understand what the church is doing to you. She is not rubbing your nose in anything. She is handing you the words of the one outsider in the Gospels whose nerve the Lord praised above everybody else's. That is not a sentence of shame. It never was. It is a sentence of confidence, said by a man who knew exactly what he was and asked anyway. Breathe. God is here. So here is what I want you to do, and I will make it small enough that you will actually do it. 3 things, and they all happen inside about 10 seconds. The first. When you hear the bell, lift your head and look. Not at the priest, at the host. And then again a moment later when he lifts the chalice, and yes, the chalice too, because the elevation of the cup came a little later in history and gets forgotten, and he is no less there. The second. Say the 4 words, my Lord and my God. Silently, in your own heart, in your own voice. Not out loud, this is not something to be seen doing. And the third, which is the one I would add to the old practice, and it costs you nothing. In the second, after those words, put one name in front of him. 1. Whoever you woke up worried about. You are looking directly at the Lord of heaven and earth, and you have his full attention. Do not waste it on generalities. That is the whole practice. Look. 4 words. 1 name. Breathe. God is here. Now let me answer the objections, because I can feel them, and every one of them is fair. Someone is thinking, I cannot see. I am at the back or behind a pillar, or my eyes are not what they were, and by the time I have my head up, he has put it down again. Then close your eyes and say the words anyway. He is not less present because the sight line is bad. The looking is a help to you, not a condition he has set. A blind woman at that Mass is doing this perfectly. Someone else is thinking, our parish does not ring a bell. We have not rung one in years. Then watch his hands. You will learn the moment inside a fortnight, the pause, the words said differently, the way the whole room goes quiet a half second before it happens. And do not go and complain to anybody about the bell. I mean that. The last thing I want out of this video is a queue of people at the sacristy door on Sunday with a liturgical grievance and my name attached to it. Learn your own parish's rhythm and pray inside it. Someone else is thinking, I watch Mass on the television because I cannot get out anymore. Then say them at your screen and mean them. And know 2 things. The first is that watching a Mass is not the same as being at one, and I would not tell you otherwise. The church is honest about that, and so am I. The second is that the God you are speaking to is not confined to that building, and a woman saying my Lord and my God in a chair in her front room, because she cannot get to the church she went to for 60 years, is doing something. He sees very clearly indeed, and somebody is thinking, Pastor, I have been at Mass every Sunday for 50 years and I have never once done this, and nobody ever told me. I know. That is why I made this. There was no instruction, for most of us, and the silence about it was not anybody's malice. It is just that the things everybody assumes everybody knows are exactly the things nobody ever says out loud. I think about a woman I will call Winifred, 83, sharp as a tack, in the 3rd pew on the left for as long as anyone could remember. And when I mentioned this one afternoon, quite casually, She went very quiet, and then she said, "Nobody has ever told me I was allowed to look." Allowed? That was the word she used, and I have thought about that word ever since, because it tells you what a great many good people are actually carrying. Not doubt, not laziness. A lifetime of assuming that reverence means keeping your distance, that the right posture in front of God is the posture of somebody who has not been invited. She told me a few weeks later that she had started doing it, and that the strange part was not the moment itself. The strange part was that she had begun to look forward to it during the drive there. Breathe. God is here. Now, the hard half. Because I promised you honesty, and this is where I owe it to you. You will do this on Sunday, and it will very likely feel like nothing. You will look up and say the words, and there will be no rush of anything, and the bell will stop, and the Mass will carry on, and you will think, well, that was not much. And I need you to be ready for that, because that is the point where most people quietly abandon a good practice, not because it failed, but because it did not feel like anything, and we have been trained to treat feeling as the receipt. It is not the receipt. There is no receipt. A man does not stop saying good morning to his wife because it did not move him this particular morning. The words are not doing emotional work. They are doing relational work. And relational work is mostly invisible for a very long time, and then one day you notice you are a different person. So do it on the Sundays when it is dry. Do it on the Sundays when your mind is on the car, and the money, and the person who is not speaking to you. Say the 4 words into your own distraction, and let them be true whether or not you can feel them. There is a man I think of, and I will call him Desmond, 79, a lifelong Catholic, and a fairly reluctant one, the sort who came because his wife came and kept coming after she died, because stopping would have felt like a second funeral. He told me he had not felt anything at Mass in about 11 years. I gave him this. 4 words. Nothing else. And he came back 3 months later and said something I have never forgotten. He said, "I still do not feel anything. But I have noticed I am no longer thinking about the roof." That is what this does. It does not manufacture feeling. It gathers your attention once, in the middle of a service, where your attention has been wandering for 50 years, and it puts that attention where it belongs, and attention, given deliberately and repeatedly to a person, is what love actually is when you strip the weather off it. Breathe. God is here. And one more word of mercy before I let you go, because I know exactly who needs it. Somebody watching this is already worrying about the Sundays they will forget. You will be halfway through the Our Father and realize the elevation went past you entirely, and you were thinking about your daughter's phone call. Nothing is lost. Nothing. You have not missed a train. He was not standing there waiting to see whether you would look, ready to be disappointed. That is not who he is. And if the practice I have just given you turns into one more thing you can fail at, then I have done you harm rather than good, and I would rather you forgot the whole video. So hold it lightly, miss it, and say the words at the next Mass. Miss it for a month, and start again in June. He is not counting. Trust God, and let the practice be a gift rather than a duty. It was invented for people who thought they were not worthy to come close. It has always been for exactly that person. If you are that person tonight, then this was made for you 800 years ago, and it has been waiting. Now, let us pray, and let us do it the way I have just asked you to do it on Sunday. So do not close your eyes for this one. Keep them open. Lord Jesus Christ, you are here. We are not going to argue with you about whether we deserve to look at you. Thomas did not deserve it either, and you came back through a locked door and held out your hands to him anyway. So we lift our heads. My Lord and my God. Lord, for the ones watching who have not been able to get to Mass in years, the ones in chairs, the ones on oxygen, the ones whose legs will not carry them up those steps anymore, do not let them believe for one more day that they are further from you than the people in the front pew. My Lord and my God. Lord, for the ones who stopped going, not out of anger, out of shame, because of something they carry that they have never said out loud to anybody. You invented this moment for exactly those people. Draw them back through a locked door, if you have to. My Lord and my God. And now, while we are looking at you, one name each, not out loud, just say it in your heart, the way you will on Sunday, the person you woke up worried about. Say it now. He has heard it. Amen. So this Sunday, the bell rings, you lift your head, you look at him, my Lord and my God, and then one name. That is all. Nobody will see you do it, and it will take less time than clearing your throat. and it may quietly change what Mass is for you. If nobody ever told you that you were allowed to look, do me a favor and leave a comment saying so, because I have a strong feeling Winifred was not the only one, and I think it would do a great many of you good to see each other's names underneath this. And if you know somebody who has stopped going, who feels they are not fit to come near it anymore, send them this one. That gesture was invented for them. Somebody should tell them, breathe. God is here. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May He lift up His countenance upon you and give you peace. And may He remind you every single day that you are loved, you are seen, and you are not alone. See you next time. Before you go, a quiet word. If anything you heard today touched a place in you that has been waiting, a parent in her final years, a child far from the faith, a soul you've been carrying for years, I wrote a manual that may help. The link is in the description below. Read 2 pages. See if it speaks to your heart. May the Lord bless you and keep you.